How much money can a stick welder make? Let's dive into it. There's a lot of different types of stick welding going on out there. You got to consider whether you're a structural welder, a pipe welder, a boiler tube welder, rig welder, you're doing underwater welding, which we've discussed before, combo welder. Combo welder is kind of a gray area because you're going to be running some TIG while you're doing your stick as well. Let's dive into the different types. Your structural welders, we're talking welding on I-beams, plate, skyscrapers, kind of depends on the industry you're in. If you're building pre-built buildings, structural could also be considered like cowl panels for a rancher. Those guys, they can range anywhere from $15 an hour to $40 an hour. I'd say the guys on skyscrapers, maybe in the union, they would be making $50, $55 an hour. But a structural welder, if you're in the right spot, you can make plenty of money. Rig welders, that's what I know and love. I was a rig welder for many years. Rig welder being somebody who runs their own welding truck, maintains their own equipment. Sometimes you contract out, sometimes you're split check. The average wage for a rig welder is $45 an hour on your arm, basically for your talent, from the shoulder to the holder. $15 to $17 an hour for your truck, and then $120 a day per diem. What's that equate out to be? About $60, $65 an hour on average. That's split check. If you're contract, you're looking at, you can be anywhere up to $75, $80 an hour. I've talked to guys who have made several $100s an hour depending on the job they're on. Of course, things change if you get into TIG or other processes. Boiler tube welders, a lot of times tube welders, they're running TIG, maybe a TIG root, TIG hot pass, and then stick the rest of the way out. I think it's getting pretty rare that they're running 60-10 or stick rod on a lot of those tube weld processes, but some of them guys, I believe they make $30 an hour up to $50 an hour. I think it depends on if you're in a union or not. And we've talked about underwater welding. There really isn't an industry for underwater welding. You'll be a hard hat diver, basically a construction worker diver, but you have to know how to weld while you're underwater. There really isn't a guy designated to be an underwater welder. I think every diver who works in that industry has to know how to weld underwater, and it's usually for lifting lugs, to make a pick underwater. You're not going to be welding a pipeline underwater because the weld quality just isn't there. Those guys make a ton of money, not specifically for the welding. A lot of them make money depending on how deep they go and how many years they got, which rolls into experience. Like anything else, when you're just getting started out, you don't have as much experience, you're still doing some learning, you're probably not gonna make what the top end experienced guy is. Of course, the welding industry is a little bit different in that respect, that if you're brand new out of school and you can go pass the same weld test as a journeyman on the job, you will likely get the same wage. You may not know as much, you'll be learning on the way, but they're still gonna pay you for your talent. So let's say a journeyman, a guy who's got 15 years experience making $45 an hour, and you go in and you take your 3G and 4G plate test, with the backer, you're gonna make $45 an hour along with that guy if you pass that test. That's the nice thing about the welding industry. There's really no discrimination on experience. If you can go in and make that test, the same test that everybody else takes, you're gonna make that same money. Same goes for rig welders. Companies really don't care how much time you got in, as long as you can produce quality welds in a timely manner. You go in at, all the rig welders will be making $45 an hour, 45, 15, and 100. You go take your test, usually a 6G, 2-inch 6G, 60-10 root, 70-18 the rest of the way out, you'll be making 45, 15, and 100. That's pretty much how the welding industry works. The overall range of a stick welder, $15 an hour, clear up to a couple hundred, $200 an hour if you're in the right place at the right time. Of course, them high dollar ones, they're hard to get and you really gotta fight for them, but they're there. Another big factor in how much you're gonna make as a stick welder, as a welder in general, but as a stick welder, is gonna be job location, geographic location. A lot of times these welding jobs are out in the middle of nowhere, what I know of it anyways, up here in the northern states, a lot of wide open range. You get down around Texas, some of the southern states that are pretty populated, there's a lot of supply, a lot of welders running around there, a lot of competition. The wages might be a little bit lower. However, you get up towards North Dakota, where it's cold in the wintertime, nobody wants to be there, the elements are terrible, the jobs are remote, sometimes you live in a man camp. A lot of welders made a ton of money in North Dakota, especially structural welders. I got some friends up there, as we're filming this, making about $7,000 a week working on drilling rigs, frac tanks. Of course, they're running their welding trucks. I think they're getting paid contract. I don't know what the hourly wage is, but I know they're making $7,000 a week, basically as a structural welder, stick welder. So geographic location makes a big difference. Some jobs overseas, they pay a lot. Some jobs overseas don't pay so much. I worked in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, $35 an hour. Wage wasn't great, wasn't terrible. The experience was awesome though. You go diving every night after work, that wasn't too bad. Part of that geographic location is your cost of living. So we know wages change from where you're at in relation to where the job is. Cost of living makes a big difference too. A little cheaper to live in some of them places. You know, you get down in Texas where there's an abundance of housing. I think it's a little cheaper to live down there. Pretty cheap to live in Wyoming where I work most of the time. Living expenses isn't terrible. Basically, if you're in a man camp, they're covering your housing for you. They might cut your per diem down, but you don't pay anything in rent. When I was in Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay, they paid me $40 a day per diem, basically covered my food. I lived in a man camp. Didn't cost me nothing for housing. You get into places like California, if you have to go to a refinery in California and do work where housing prices are super inflated, it's gonna cost you an arm and a leg to live. It's gonna be, you know, $1,000, $2,000 a month to rent a place. I worked a lot in Colorado, down in Greeley. Lived in Brighton in a really nice house, paid $300 a month to rent a room. So your cost of living is gonna make a big difference depending on where you're working at. It's one of those considerations you gotta make. If you're gonna be a stick welder, understand that jobs aren't always at home and you're gonna have to soak up that cost living away from your main residence. A lot of people associate stick welding with grimy, grungy shop, heavy iron, you know, heavy equipment or piping, but there's also people out there who do artwork with it. A lot of times you use wire or TIG for the artwork, but some of those really good artists, they'll use all the processes they have to make their artwork really pop. So if you're not really industrial, there's still room to make money on the art side too. If you're kind of one of them artsy people, I'm not. I'm pretty square plumbing level. I need a set of blueprints to know what I'm doing. Stick welding is super versatile. You can do it at home. If you have a pretty inexpensive weld machine off Amazon, you can weld up just about anything you need. So I always ran a welding truck. Not always, but most of my welding career, I ran a welding truck. I like the paycheck better. I like the freedom of having my own tools with me all the time. You get treated a little bit different on a job. The pay is good, right? Your truck is making money and you're making money, so you almost double your wage. However, that costs a lot of money to set that truck up. My recommendation is always don't go buy a brand new platinum, top of the line, $110,000 dually pickup. Don't do that. You don't need that. Go get you some truck that's reliable, you know, 100,000, 200,000 miles on it. I always choose diesel. They tend to last longer. Get one that's beat up because you're gonna be taking it on job sites where there's cranes, there's forklifts, there's equipment, people who don't know how to handle that stuff. There's new hands. You're gonna get a dent is what I'm saying. You're gonna get a ding in that truck. And if you have a $110,000 truck out there, you'll feel it right in your gut. So get something reliable. Doesn't have to be shiny. Everything costs money when you're putting that truck together. Don't get the $110,000 truck and then don't go buy a brand new $30,000 weld machine. That stuff is expensive and it will take you a long time to recover that money. So even if you're running a welding truck and you've spent that much money, you're talking 10 years before you can actually feel like you've recovered that, because you'll be using that equipment and you probably wear it out before you get it paid off. Go get a $2,000 to a $7,000 Lincoln SA200 or a 300D and get you a $40,000, 10-year-old dually diesel. Throw the machine in the bed. Don't even put a flatbed on it yet. Save yourself a little money. If you spend a ton of money on that equipment, you might as well go single hand. You might as well not even run a truck, because there's some single hand welders out there making $55 an hour and the company provides all their tools, which makes sense. If you're willing to go out and buy a $110,000 truck, the guy that's making $55 an hour and no truck, he's way ahead of the game. So just remember that when you're running a welding rig, it's going to be expensive to start it out. Once it's paid off, no big deal. Then you're in the money. You don't even notice it, but getting to that point is really hard. It's a hard life to live because you have to be working. Stick welders, depending on location, depending on the job, depending on whether you're running a welding truck, no matter what your ability is, you can make a living at stick welding. It's a good pathway to some financial stability. Start out in a fab shop somewhere working for some rancher on some cow panels and work your way up to a skyscraper, or working on drilling rig parts like my buddies in North Dakota. Pretty easy to set yourself up good in life at $7 grand a week. I think we covered everything for you. If you got any questions, let us know. If this content was helpful, stay tuned for our next one. We got some more stuff coming your way.